Now it is my honor to welcome FAA Administrator, the Honorable Michael G. Whitaker. At last year's forum, I stood before you advocating for his confirmation, so it is a pleasure to stand before you this year and introduce him as Administrator. With over 3 decades of experience in aviation, he previously served as Deputy Administrator of the FAA from 2013 to 2016, where he was responsible for implementation of the FAA's next-gen modernization program for air traffic control systems. He has executive experience serving as the Chief Operating Officer of Supernal, an electric advanced air mobility company, CEO of Interglobe Enterprises, the operator of Indigo, and held various roles at United and Transworld Airlines. Administrator Whitaker is also a private pilot, holds bachelor's degrees in political science and French from the University of Louisville, and has a Juris Doctorate degree from Georgetown University Law Center. Please join me in welcoming FAA Administrator Michael Whitaker. Thanks, sir. Yeah, thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. When Captain Ambrosi says 3 decades, it makes me sound old. When he says TWA, it makes me sound really old. So, great to be here. It's an honor to be here on this solemn anniversary. It's not my first time here. I think I spoke at 2 of these events when I was deputy a few years back. So, I want to start by saying it's good to be among friends. Glad to be here and appreciate your dedication to safety. Thank the Air Safety Organization for all the work that you do, for the collaboration and support that you give us. Captain Ambrosi mentioned the NTSB chair is going to be here tomorrow, and I know that because she called me yesterday to say, what are you going to talk about? So we compared notes, and then she never loses an opportunity to remind me of open recommendations that she wants us to act on. So you're lucky to have her here. So I'm coming on my soon-to-be first anniversary in this job. That'll happen later next month. And I came in with a pretty clear idea of why I was here and what was important, which really boiled down to safety of the NAS. And that may sound obvious, but it's not always obvious, I think. But given what was going on in the NAS and the situation post-COVID, I had particular focus on really being focused on safety above all else. I had that clarity when I came through the confirmation hearing, and I had that clarity when I started work. And the way I spoke about that internally at FAA with the executive team and in town halls was to use the phrase aviate, navigate, communicate. And I'm relieved that I don't have to explain to you what that means, which I usually do at this point. But our focus was on aviating, and our job was to run a good agency and keep the NAS safe. And that was really the sole focus of the beginning of my tenure. So it was a down and in, really just focused on safety and making sure that we're meeting the mission. Some of those initial concerns you're familiar with, and Captain Ambrosi mentioned some of them. Controller staffing was a major concern, not enough controllers, based on the inability to train during COVID and based on a government shutdown that had happened right before COVID that cost us about a year of training. Controller fatigue was a concern. There were a lot of articles about it. I spent my first couple months traveling to facilities and saw that fatigue and spoke with controllers who've been working 6 days a week, sometimes for years. We were looking at rapid capacity growth as you had a COVID rebound, capacity growing 5, 6, 8% a year, while we are not able to grow our controller workforce that fast. So we were starting to see a gap in that situation. Near misses or significant safety events, well publicized as well. Mental health issues We started an ARC to address that, and the juniority problem, as it's referred to, again, another leftover from COVID. So really started with that down and in focus on safety, and then 10 weeks into my tenure, the Alaska airline flight incident occurred with the plug door departing the aircraft. So I think at that point, doubled down even more on safety. And I think it's fair to say that the first year has really been about the safety of the NAS and really being focused on looking at where those risks are and trying to mitigate those risks. The Alaska Air event has been extremely well publicized. I'm not going to spend more time talking about that, but I will say that we've had some learnings from that incident, and just as we have worked intensively with Boeing to correct some of the flaws in their system, we've looked at our own systems as well. And just a couple of takeaways. I think the main takeaway for me was that we have to constantly review our own oversight model and not just put an oversight model in place and let it operate for years unexamined. So we're really looking to migrate to a more dynamic model where we analyze risks in the system, but also understand those risks change over time. They change based on external events like COVID, and be able to monitor those changes and put our resources and our attention where those risks lie. So our focus is to track those risks and mitigate those risks. And we often talk about the multiple layers of safety. I think it's something we all grew up with. Sometimes it's referred to as the Swiss cheese model. We need to be able to assess the safety of those various layers. We need to be able to dig into the data and really understand where things are breaking down and where weaknesses might be. So a lot of our work going forward is about how to make that system more dynamic and how to really continuously improve our oversight model. And on that note, I'm going to pause because to help me with this effort, I recently engaged a gentleman named John Ilson. John, are you here? Would you stand up for a second? So John worked with me in my last job as Chief Safety Officer, and I just brought him on as Senior Advisor on safety. He's expert in safety programs and safety management systems. He spent some time at ICAO, some time at MITRE, and maybe more significantly, 27 years as an ALPA member, flying for a company you might remember called US Air. So really happy to have John on board. So if you're worried about whether we have your interests in mind, you can tackle John on the way out, get his phone number, and you'll always know. So thanks, John. So the other takeaway I'll mention, and Captain Ambrosi touched on this as well, is the need for better data, more data, and better tools to analyze that data. I think we have, for the past 20 years or more, told this story about how we now prevent accidents by analyzing data. And I think that's true, but it's also true that it's time to really up our game in that space. I think we need to be able to analyze that data and again, not focus on accidents, but focus on those layers of safety. So we not only can avoid accidents, but we can avoid significant safety events. And that's really the ultimate outcome that we want to achieve. So that's a snapshot of where we are, and that's where our work is going to go going forward, and working with John and with our entire safety team to take a fresh look at that, and we're going to be looking forward to partnering with you in that endeavor because you touch the system in so many ways. So looking forward to working with you in that context. And with that, I'll understand I'm going to be cross-examined now by Captain Ambrosi.
Well, I appreciate your willingness to come be in front of our crowd today, and the willingness to take a few questions. I prepared a few here. Of course, the first one's going to be about RCO. So as you heard during my remarks, we're concerned about operational concepts that would would take what we call the most important safety device on an airplane out of the cockpit. So we're going to fight like hell to make sure that doesn't happen. As you are aware, two European airplane manufacturers are proposing some language that would allow such to happen, and there are some studies ongoing. Even the regulations have started already. So can you share the FAA's perspective and current concerns on the pursuit of reduced crew concepts and what that would mean for aviation safety?
Yeah, thank you. And I guess I'll start by saying couldn't agree more. Two well-trained, well-rested pilots in the cockpit is a key pillar. It's the law of the land, and I intend for it to stay the law of the land. And I think you and your team have done a good job of bringing me up to speed on some of the intricacies of that issue. We have begun engaging more with the EASA. I think there's been a bit of a period of time when that engagement had dropped off, but we'll be engaging on a quarterly basis with the EASA. So this issue will remain front and center, and we'll continue to work it.
All right. Well, thank you for that commitment. FAA priorities. So, we have unparalleled commercial aviation safety track record here in the United States, and we continue to improve on that record with rigorous attention to safety management practices, which you spoke about. There are many reasons why we're in the safest period in history, a lot including first officer qualifications and training, voluntary safety programs, and the like, data sharing, which you're a big proponent of. Implementing new air traffic control systems. A lot has been accomplished already. In addition to maintaining the highest possible safety standards, what are your most important other priorities to accomplish during your first term as FAA administrator?
I'll start with data and safety systems. It's a bit of a behind the curtain activity, but I think it's probably the most important thing we'll work on during my term. I think data has always been the holy grail, and there are, once you get into the weeds, we can all agree it's a good idea, but the actors, the companies all have data privacy concerns, they have competitive concerns. We don't necessarily want to own the data at FAA because it can be FOIA'd, so that makes people less interested in turning over the data. There are issues around de-identifying data. I'm sure you probably have 10 issues you'll want to talk to me about this. So we've got to figure out a way to make that data available and have the tools to get at it. And I think that's the game changer. To how that translates, our current goal is to get to zero close calls. Technically, what we're referring to is Category A and B, ICAO category, near misses, runway events. So that's a manifestation of that. I guess the other big issue that I have to mention is controller workforce. I think we have workforce issues across the ecosystem of aviation, but since we actually have that workforce in our group, we really need to bring those numbers up where they need to be and have these facilities adequately staffed.
Well, we've got some good news with the FAA reauthorization there to hopefully get some troops on the way for Rich and his guys at NACA.
Yeah, and we met our target last year. We raised the target this year. We're going to meet that. We're going to raise the target again next year. It's going to get a little harder each year, but that'll help us get ahead of the curve.
Yeah, we appreciate those efforts. It's not easy to train a pilot. It's certainly not easy to train an aircraft controller to do the difficult job they do every day. Since becoming an FAA administrator last October, you said your focus is on safety. There's been a lot of attention to Boeing with the mid-door plug departing the airplane. We get asked a lot as ALPA about oversight of manufacturers, and we certainly rely on the FAA's oversight to ensure that the safety of the aircraft that we fly. In addition to the work that's already started with the Aircraft Certification Safety Accountability Act, it's clear that there's still work ongoing and improvements need to be made. What work has the FAA done already under your leadership since the accident to improve oversight of OEMs? And what more do you plan on doing going forward in that area?
Since the Alaska incident? So it's been a pretty extensive list of activities with Boeing, including extensive audits, having more inspectors on the floor, spending time with the employees in the factory to really understand what's going on, identifying technology that needs to be deployed on the floor, such as tool management and part management, basic systems to track parts and track tools and avoid FOD and the like. And of course, we put a cap on capacity for Boeing until those factors get worked. I think at a broader point, really focusing on training some of these seniority issues that we've had to make sure that if you look at a functioning safety management system, you identify a risk when you don't have a senior enough workforce or you have training gaps, and the responsible response to that is to mitigate those risks through training programs or augmenting staff and things of that nature. So we're focused on bringing Boeing and other OEMs into the safety management system world that we've seen be so effective in airlines, and then connecting those systems up.
What role do you see, if any, for us as airline pilots?
Well, I think as we saw with the MAX accidents, one of the themes that came out of that is sort of the human in the loop, as they like to say in an engineering context, but pilots are that human, and understanding as an aircraft is designed what that role is and having that translate over to flight standards when rules and training are developed as well was a key takeaway from that. So I think that's probably the most important learning from that episode.
Yeah, and having line pilots involved throughout the process,
exactly.
People that operate the airplanes is a key step in that direction. Advanced air mobility is a hot topic. Let me see where I am on the watch here. I think we got a couple more minutes. 1 minute, so this will be the last one, sir.
Sure.
You'll get out of here. All right. Advanced air mobility is a hot topic in aviation everywhere we go. It presents opportunity and obviously considerable challenges. This is a heavy lift for you and the team to figure out how to get these all into the airspace together. What's the vision on managing this complex, diverse, and these dense operations? I know, I personally, great, more technology, bring it, but make sure we keep them out of the airspace. We don't need somebody blundering across our final at JFK or here at DCA.
Yeah.
So what's the thought?
Well, when I think of these new technologies, you think of drones, and then you think of advanced air mobility. The drones are an easier case to make. Most of that is not trying to integrate into the airspace, but separating them out of the airspace. So they're below 400 feet, keep them away from airports. That's a more manageable issue. With advanced air mobility, it's an interesting dynamic. We have manufacturers who come in and say, we're going to build this kind of aircraft that never existed before, and so then we have to figure out how to certify it. We've had to figure out operating rules. So there's a rule that's coming out for powered lift that will provide a framework for operating that. But we don't really know what the business case is going to be, what's going to work, what's not going to work.
Right.
So we're trying to keep up with that advancement, but also recognizing we don't know which way is it going to go. Is this going to be primarily a function to bring people to the airport, in which case we've got a lot of work to do and figure out how you bring routes in there and how you keep it away from departures and arrivals, or is it going to be something that provides service to small airports in rural communities? So we're watching that piece of it. Right now they'll be operating at the same rules everybody else does. So if you think about class B, C, or D, you've got to make communication and get clearance to come in. All those rules will apply. That's your first level of protection. If that's going to change because the business case changed, we'll have to come up with a set of rules to make sure that is done safely. Very good. So more work for our air traffic controllers. More work for all of us. Yeah, for everybody. That's right. For everybody. That's right. All right, sir. Well, I really, really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you so much for coming. Hope to see you next year. Yep. Thank you.